So how's it going, my comics gentlemen? We're here today with Mike Uhlir, the creator of Starfell. How you doing, Mike?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Why, really quick, I wanted to ask you this. Why did you make the title Starfell and not Starfall?
Okay, so the Starfell, the comic book, is based off a real town in Wetumpka, Alabama. And what's cool about the town is that it sits on a meteor impact crater. 65 million years ago, a meteor, massive one, hit that area. So you can go visit this impact crater, and the houses sit on the rim and everything. So, um, anyways, one day I was trying to figure out a title for the story that I wanted to do, and I couldn't think of one. And then I walked by this mural that's painted on one of the buildings down there, and it says Wetumpka, Alabama, where the stars fell. And
Mm,
I was like, oh, that's it. I'll call it Starfell, which is the name of the fictional town based off of a real town in Alabama. Um, so I went with Starfell, and it just sounded like a cool little town name to go with. So that's kind of where that came from.
I like it. Um, you kickstarted the books, right? Did you kickstart
Yeah.
them?
So the first one I funded myself. I went, when I had the money, I went page by page, and it took about 9 months to do. So the first book was not Kickstarted. I just did it myself, and I worked with the artist. The second book was Kickstarted, and it was successful. So we had finished and wrapped issue 2. We are working on issue 3 now, but I still have some left over from that first Kickstarter and some investor funds. So we're going to do like the first half of the book using those funds, and then kickstart the last half of it. So that way there's like, cool preview art that people can look at. And, if they want to read the first like 3 or 4 pages of the book in black and white, that's going to be up there. So,
It's gonna be pretty cool.
yeah, excited about this one.
How many issues do you have planned?
A lot. Like, I think to wrap the whole story, it probably like somewhere around the ballpark of 25 to 30
Okay.
books. Yeah, it's a long story. Like if you read the book, it's very, I don't want to say slow paced, but it has a build to it. 2 books in, you barely see any monsters, and it's a monster. It's a 60 sci-fi monster homage. Uh, so yeah, a lot of books. This train's just going to keep on trucking.
Where'd you find your artist?
So Lucas assists. I found him on Reddit. I, I went through a lot of artists. I'd spent the first about year and a half just finding artists, concept artists, and so I stumbled upon him on Reddit, and his style matched what I was looking for, which is kind of more of a, I won't say realistic, but not overly stylized type of artwork, very clean and crisp, and
Yeah.
so I found him on Reddit, and so he's out in Brazil. He lives in Sao Paulo. And then we just struck up a conversation. He started doing a couple pages, and then it worked out. And then the colorist is his best friend, so they're both in Sao Paulo. And so after working with them for almost 2 years, they're just we're all like just buddies and synced up. Like I can't imagine working with other artists except for them at this moment.
Does he do it all digital?
Well, they use I believe it's called Clip Studio. It's a program, so it's hand drawn, but he's doing it on a tablet.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's still hand drawn, and I don't know. I think the software kind of vectorizes as you draw, so it's digital, but he's hand drawing it. He has a stylus, and so yeah, it's not ink to paper, but it's definitely uh, stylus to monitor,
Oh,
so to speak. Yeah.
I mean, digital art come a long way though. Like I looked at that and couldn't even tell.
Oh yeah, it's unreal. Like they have different styles of brush styles and plugins they can use. So yeah, and it makes it so much quicker for them to work if they have to erase something, or if they draw, like say they draw a bat, and it looks a little too small, they can just grab it immediately, scale out the size, and duplicate it all over the place. So it just makes the process so much more efficient for modern comic book artists. Although I grew up reading comic books in the '80s, so like I still have an attachment to that old school hand drawn on a
Mm.
piece of paper. But modern world, man.
Comic Cons. Have you been to Comic Cons yet?
I have not. I've been to the Orlando Comic Book Convention, but that was many years ago. And then next year, after we got a couple more books, we're going to start hitting up the other ones. There's a big comic book convention in Pensacola, Florida. There's a couple up here in Alabama. I'd love to go down to Orlando and hit up one of the bigger ones.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like a New York Comic Con or San Diego, that might be a few years out, but hopefully be there one day.
Have you shopped the book around to any publishers?
No, not yet. I kind of kept it close to the chest for a while. Like I used to work for an augmented reality video game company. I used to develop and create their intellectual property. So I learned very quickly there, just get your copyrights, own your property, own your work.
Mm-hmm.
And once that's all kind of finished up, then it's like I felt more comfortable in showing it. So after issue 3 is done is when it's just submissions going to go all over the place. And also before I start sending submissions, I wanted to make sure that you could tell there's a good cohesive story going on. It's not just like a one-off. Like
Right.
really wanted to show the bulk of what the story is going to be about. So after this next book, it's I'll start doing submissions.
Do you get a whole universe built, or are you gonna like branch off and tell other stories?
So I'm sticking with Starfell for right now for the foreseeable future, and I have different ideas for other books, which I might collaborate with other writers. But as far as Starfell goes, it's just going to be kind of this linear story for a while that I really want to stick to. Not to say it's not going to spin off other books outside of it, like in the Starfell universe. Um, there's a very rich history in this town of Wetumpka, especially in the 1800s. It has kind of like this dark history with the Creek Indian War and all kinds of stuff. So there'll be like an 1800s version,
Mm.
side story, I guess, so to speak, a little, and also we'll probably skip ahead to like the 1980s as well, and just kind of. I'm just going to keep building out the Starfell universe, and then I think once I'm done with that, I'll start doing something else. I have some really cool ideas for other books, but
Does weird things happen in the town? Like magnets do weird things, or
uh, no, I mean, like any small town in America, they have like their own mythology and stuff. There's like they have a myth of a goat man that lives up in the impact crater. But there is like some in the 1800s in that town, and I think they called it the Dark and Bloody Square, where for like this short period of time in the late 1800s, in this one little section of the downtown area, all these like horrible events happen, like people just getting publicly executed in the street. A lady had thrown her baby out of one of the windows there in the street. Like it was like this really almost out of a Stephen King book. Like there's this really dark moment, these little things happening in that town. Um, but outside of that, no, it's nothing really weird. It is a mesmerizing town. I don't know if you ever seen the Tim Burton movie Big Fish. Um,
I haven't.
it came out in like 2004, but he films it in that town. So just on the outskirts of that town is an abandoned Tim Burton movie set, and it's just mind blowing. It's these old Tim Burton looking buildings that are kind of a little dilapidated now. So that's kind of cool. But I mean, other than the fact that it sits on a meteor crater,
Mhm.
it's wild being able to go and see that. It is a little otherworldly when you're walking through these Alabama woods, and then you're in this impact crater where it's just beach sand everywhere. Like it's because the meteor just like knocked all this beach sand up into up into the top layer of the earth. It's that's pretty wild. But outside of my own little creepy story that's going on about the town, I think that's kind of it. You know.
I mean, is it safe to go down in the hole and look at everything, or
So yeah, they just started doing tours now. so you can go with geologists and they'll take you all around that site, and in and around the town are different landmarks of the impact crater. There's houses on the rim of it, so you can take these really scary steep roads to try to get up there, and you're riding on top of this massive impact crater. If you didn't, but it's covered in trees and stuff, so if you didn't know it was an impact crater, it just kind of looks like a small mountain just kind of sticking out in the middle of nowhere over there.
All right.
Yeah, but yeah, you can take tours there, and it's a gorgeous town. Absolutely beautiful. It sits in between. You got the town, and you got this beautiful river, and you got the impact crater sitting behind it. So it's nothing like Florida, where I'm from, which is like, I'm from Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and it's concrete jungle down there. So a little different for a Florida boy.
Should do a Kickstarter add-on to give people some of the sand from the.
Yeah, that was one of the ideas. Another thing that's real cool, like, so when you read the comic book, there's all these, like, the meteor crater, the meteor, when it hits, it kind of creates these little purple shards of crystals. That's a big part of the story, and the reason why that's there is when you walk around that town, especially in their parks, you're almost literally kicking up these quartz crystal stones that have this pink hue to it.
That's pretty
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So I probably need to get permission from the town. If I'm allowed to, I'll probably collect a bunch of them and then, polish them up and make that as a Kickstarter reward. You can actually get some of that quartz crystal that meteor in the comic book's based off of. And as of right now, the town's been really cool about it, supportive. It sells in the bookstores down there, and I have a lecture at their museum next month about the book, and everyone's just been really stoked and happy about it. So I think they might let me do that. I just have to get permission, because there's, you got to deal with geology and state laws. I don't really know how that applies. If I can just steal rocks and mail them to people, or the sand itself,
How many comic shops are you in around Alabama?
So right now, I'm in the bookstore in downtown, and then there's this comic book shop just outside of that town, and all they do is sell independent comic books, and that's the only people that have been selling them so far. It's the only people I've actually gone to talk to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, it's just once the third book's done, I'll start really branching out. Obviously you can buy the books online. But even though they're in these like two little shops, I mean, they've sold hundreds of copies. So it's pretty wild. But yeah, so the comic book shop in Alabama is called Dreamcatcher Comics, and like I said, they almost exclusively sell independent comic books. It's a great comic book shop for indie creators, and they just give love and support to independent creators, and it's kind of just showing that these big companies like Marvel and DC just kind of, they're just not as important anymore. Everyone kind of wants to read these cool like indie books.
Yeah. How is the indie scene in Alabama?
I mean, it's awesome. And so there's a big comic book shop in Montgomery, which is kind of the big city from where I live. And then there's the one where I sell my books, and then there's a bunch of them up in Birmingham. So, I mean, it's got a heavy comic scene. They have a nice big convention up in Huntsville. They have another big comic convention, anime convention in Birmingham. They used to have one in Montgomery, which was great, but after the pandemic, it stopped, and we're kind of hoping it picks back up. But yeah, there's a lot of independent comic book readers and Dungeons and Dragons players. So they go in hand in hand. But the scene's great. It feels more down to earth, and everyone knows everybody kind of thing in the comic book shop, which most comic book shops are. But where I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, it kind of wasn't like that. There's a big comic book shop down in Fort Lauderdale called Tate's Comics, and it really doesn't have that like vibe of everyone knows everyone. It's a really big store. Orlando's the same way. They got really big shops, and it just doesn't feel like doesn't feel like a home kind of thing.
So what social medias are you on?
So I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook. You can, if you want to look at all those, you can just go to starfellstudios.com. We've got all the links up there on the website. It's easy to access. Um, yeah, and then just follow us. We tend to post a little bit more on Instagram than we do Facebook, just because the nature of the beast, and Twitter almost a little bit more sporadically, just because it's not like Instagram. As you know, we probably go through the same thing. You get different viewer. Like Facebook's more for the older crowd, and Twitter's more if you just got to do some shout outs. Like, if we're doing heavy Kickstarter campaigning, like we'll use Twitter a little bit more frequently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, dead or alive, who is your dream team to make a comic book with?
Like, if I could just pick anybody?
Yeah, anybody, dead or alive.
Dead or alive?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alex Ross is the cover artist for sure. Okay, so Alex Ross cover art, Garth Ennis writer as the author, and I don't want to. I mean, I want to say McFarlane. I know you're a Spawn fan, but you have to understand. Like, when I grew up in the '80s, like I got the first appearance of Venom when I was like 7 years old, and I picked it off of like
Oh yeah.
off a comic book rack in a pharmacy. And there was just such a night and day difference from me looking at my Fantastic Four and Avengers comics, and then seeing that Spider-Man, just being like, what is going on here? So growing up in the '80s and a teenager in the '90s, like Todd McFarlane, I don't know. That's kind of the top for me, and Jim Lee. But yeah, so if I had to pick, I'd go Alex Ross cover art, Garth Ennis writing, Todd McFarlane drawing.
Would you make a new character, or would you expand on a character that they already have?
I wouldn't feel comfortable working on someone else's character.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's theirs, and I would feel like a stepfather coming in.
Right.
So I would try to make my own. And if I'm working with a team of people, then it's more collaborative effort. So it would be like whatever we come up with. So yeah, but also to answer your question, if I had to pick a book that I would love to write, that's already a property, it would be Preacher, which is a Garth Ennis book.
Yeah.
That's my favorite comic book series, I think, of all time. It's very hardcore, and and it was written in the '90s, so I don't think there's a lot of stuff you can do these days with what was in there. But it's just an epic book, epic series.
I think The Boys too. I don't think they could pull.
Oh, The Boys! They couldn't do The Boys either. I mean, the TV show is awesome, but it's different from the comics. But yeah, Garth Ennis is he's just a master writer. Like, he's great, and Steve Dillon's awesome. The artist for Preacher, and I think he did Wolverine Origins as well.
I think so.
Yeah, and I really like Steve Dillon's artwork.
So, is there anything you want to say before we go?
If you can, just go pick up a copy of we either purchase a copy of Starfell on www.starfellstudios.com. If you don't want to purchase a physical copy, you at least have the ability to read issues 1 and 2 for free. Just go ahead and download and read them. Like, to me, it's just, I want people to kind of know the story, not looking to make money off digital downloads just yet. So, and I hope you enjoy the book. It takes place in 1962, and it's homage to 60s sci-fi horror movies.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you for taking the time to come talk with me.
Yeah, man, no problem. Thank you for having me.